Good morning, and thank you for joining us, and welcome to the February 2019 edition of Esri's Law Enforcement Webinar Series. I'm Chris Delaney, Esri's Law Enforcement Technical Lead, and I'll be your host for today's webinar, where we'll take a look at how Philadelphia Police Department is using Esri's Web AppBuilder technology to quickly and easily create apps for use for their crime and intelligence analysts. Before we get started, let's take a quick look at the agenda for today's webinar. First, I'd like to start out with a brief overview of the functionality of Web AppBuilder and talk through an example app to demonstrate some of its capabilities. Next, I'll be turning it over to the Philly Police's Director of Research and Analysis, Kevin Thomas, who will walk through the missions, objectives, and challenges PPD was trying to use Web AppBuilder to solve. From there, PPD's GIS specialist, Lynn Gaines, and George Kay, supervisor of the Research and Analysis Unit, will walk us through some of the apps they have configured to support crime analysis workflows. Philly Police has also been hard at work at an innovative CGIS-compliant cloud environment where Web AppBuilder and their ArcGIS Enterprise portal live. Andrew Smart, Senior GIS Analyst at Esri Business Partner Geographic, will join us to provide a brief overview. And at the end, I'll wrap up with some resources on how to get started with Web AppBuilder, and we'll save some time for questions. If you have any questions at any point during the webinar, please enter them in the chat window. We'll attempt to answer the questions in the chat window during the webinar and at the end as well. Okay, let's get started with a brief introduction to Web AppBuilder for ArcGIS. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Web AppBuilder for ArcGIS, it is a WebGIS application that allows you to build your own web applications. Web AppBuilder lives in either ArcGIS Online or in ArcGIS Enterprise. If you don't know the difference between the two, ArcGIS Online is Esri's software as a service that supports mapping in the public cloud for organizations. And the sister to ArcGIS Online is called ArcGIS Enterprise. That's the evolution of ArcGIS Server that enables you to take the same kind of organizational mapping capabilities and deliver it on-premise inside your firewall or up in the private cloud. Web AppBuilder is an important aspect of those platforms because it enables you to build interactive web mapping applications without having to write code, which can be really beneficial for folks like crime analysts who are meeting the needs of their law enforcement customers but are not necessarily developers. Web AppBuilder works in an interactive, what you see, what you get interface, where you're working in a builder, and that builder helps you create the app, and you see the results of what you've created in real time on the right-hand side of the builder application. We'll take a look at that live in just a minute. Web AppBuilder supports both 2D web mapping applications, and as we move increasingly into the world of 3D, it's already 3D ready. So as NextGen 911 comes online and analysts have access to the Z values or height values of incoming calls for service data, and you want to be able to make a mapping application out of that, Web AppBuilder is already ready for you to do that. These apps run on any device in any browser, and importantly, enable you to automatically have a responsive design built into the app. And what that simply means is the app already knows what the size of your screen is that you're viewing it on. So it'll show up in an appropriate size and structure for a desktop, and it'll change its structure for viewing on a smaller screen size, like a tablet or a smartphone, without you having to build that on your own. It just does it. The way Web AppBuilder works is you basically put together in a theme that you define, which defines the kind of layout and the structure of the web mapping application. You combine a number of different configurable widgets to ultimately support the mission that you're trying to solve with Web AppBuilder. We have over 40 widgets out of the box. I'll talk about a few in just a minute. Those 40 widgets can get you a really long way to building a robust web mapping application. However, Web AppBuilder also supports, if you do have development staff, the ability to build custom widgets, or if you're working with consultants, for example, and you need a certain kind of capability that one of the out-of-the-box widgets doesn't support, you can build your own widget and add it into the rest of Web AppBuilder, and you're able to solve your problem without having to build a completely custom web mapping application. The heart of Web App Builder is the 40 or so configurable widgets that you have access to as part of Web App Builder. And there's a whole bunch that you would expect to see in any kind of web mapping application. Things like the ability to see a legend, or search for data, or to be able to filter a particular layer, or to use bookmarks, or to change base maps. All of those kinds of basic sets of functionality, or to even be able to build charts off of the layers or attributes in layers in your data. But in addition, we have a number of solution-focused widgets, widgets that have been built particularly with a workflow or an industry need in mind. And in public safety, we have a number of really interesting ones, things that run from the ability to analyze the location of a suspicious package and using federal standards for evacuation and shelter in place, draw buffer areas around that suspicious package location so that you can quickly and easily understand areas that you need to evacuate when a credible threat has come in. To being able to build gridded reference graphics to do missing person searches in an area, or to be able to support situations where you need to be able to find things in an immediate area based off of the proximity of your GPS device on your smartphone. In law enforcement, we've seen these Web App Builder be used to make a whole bunch of really exciting web mapping applications. And we've generally seen kind of four main areas that law enforcement agencies are taking advantage of Web App Builder for. First and foremost, officer safety and situational awareness purposes. So using something like our Near Me widget so that on a smartphone, an officer can open up the app. It reads the GPS device of a GPS location of their app. It calls a 500 or 1,000 foot buffer immediately around their area, and it alerts the officer to nearby gang members, individuals who have been previously arrested for a firearm, any kind of officer safety related threat or intelligence related information that might be relevant for the location that the officer is approaching. Maybe the biggest application of Web App Builder in law enforcement has been around building applications for the public to consume. So the big use case being how do we develop more robust web mapping applications that help us reduce FOIA requests so that citizens can more effectively self-serve statistical requests that are relatively simple, like I'm interested in drawing a buffer around my house and getting the past 5 years worth of crime data, or I'm interested in being able to filter and search by certain types of crime and visualize that on the map. The two screenshots on this slide show a couple of examples that are actual real customers, one on the top from Toronto Police Service and from the Rochester, New York Police Department, their neighborhood crime history app. Both are great, both are publicly accessible, so if you wanted to check them out, you can search for Toronto Police Service ArcGIS or Crime App or RPD, Neighborhood Crime History App, and you can find them and play with them yourselves. One of the things that we see Web App Builder being used for extensively is around kind of mission-specific or focused analysis tasks, where you have a very clear analytical process that you're following, and a web app helps you do that very easily, especially if the user is a non-technical or a person with limited technical competency. So for example, maybe an app that helps investigators search for a suspect description, so an attribute search, but also at the same time to be able to search for to be able to geofence that so that they're prioritizing their search to an area where their investigation is occurring. Or similarly, to be able to support real-time crime center operations where a critical incident comes in and you need to know where the nearby cameras are and where recent FIs have been and all sorts of other information. Or for critical infrastructure protection, maybe at a fusion center where you've got some kind of threat that's come in, whether it is a terrorism threat or whether it is a weather-related threat, and you need to understand in the area that's affected, what's the critical infrastructure in and around that area so that we can start to take proper preventative precautions. And then lastly, around editing. So for example, maybe a simple app that any supervisor could use that could draw polygons that are representing the area where they're going to assign officers out for focused patrols. Maybe it's a hotspot area. Or for special event planning. So a simple lightweight app that helps the incident coordinator, the special events coordinator, quickly figure out exactly where they're going to place staging resources for SWAT or officer footposts along a parade route, those kinds of use cases. So when it comes to actually building with Web App Builder, it's a really straightforward process. And that process starts with understanding what it is you want to do with your app. What's the problem that you're trying to solve? Once you've got that problem figured out, there's 4 things that you do. First, you pick a theme, and the theme is really the style, the colors, and the layout, and that is where the widgets are going to be on your screen. It's the general look and feel, and the way that we do that is with something called a theme, and there's 10 default themes you can select from in Web App Builder. Next, you're inserting a web map from your ArcGIS Online or your ArcGIS Enterprise portal that you've created. That web map contains the layers that you want to be able to show in the app, and that will drive functionality in the widgets that you want to configure. And so the widgets really represent the tools that your users of the app can use to solve problems, whether it's filtering or analysis tools or editing tools. Those tools can all be configured and can be pointed to particular layers, and you've got a lot of different options and parameters that you can control on those widgets. But the bottom line is you don't have to do any coding to making those widgets work. There's a little wizard screen that's behind each of them, and it's point and click. So it makes development accessible to people who are non-developers. From there, the last thing that you're doing is attribution. So finishing up style work. What's the title of your app? Metadata around your app, a logo for your department, all those kinds of things. And then once you're there, then it's really a matter of just previewing it and then deciding who you're going to share it with. In WebGIS generally, ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise, you can share apps with a particular group of people that you define. You can share them with your entire organization. And if you're in ArcGIS Online, you can share them public, as in the examples that I showed you on the last slide. So that's it. It's really simple to quickly and easily build web applications using Web App Builder. So what I'd like to do now is just walk you through a very quick example web app that I've built using Web App Builder. This particular example is around critical infrastructure protection. So the first thing that I've done using my critical infrastructure web map that I've created that you can see here. I've got a number of different layers, and as I zoom into Tampa, those layers will appear because I have some scale dependencies on them. This particular app that I've created is meant to assist a Fusion Center in being able to identify critical infrastructure that's relevant, as I mentioned before, in the event of some kind of natural disaster or terrorist threat. I've brought in a bunch of layers: public schools, colleges and universities, places of worship, hospitals, fire stations, power plants, law enforcement agency buildings, state government buildings, all sorts of tools here, all sorts of layers here, I should say. So I built them in a web map. I got all of these layers from a great resource for law enforcement, the Highfeld Open Data Portal from Homeland Security. There's literally hundreds of layers around critical infrastructure. They are already ready as ArcGIS web services, so you can pull them into any web map or into ArcGIS Pro and immediately use them in real time. Great resource. So that's what I used to build this map. I then brought it into the Web App Builder for ArcGIS Builder mode. From here, I've got a bunch of different options. I can pick a variety of different themes, as you can see here on the left-hand side. I've chosen the dashboard theme that lets me show multiple widgets in several places. I can pick my map, and then I've got the ability to select widgets. I can pick from any of the 40 widgets that are listed. I already have a number that are pre-configured. As I select a particular widget, I can control some various configuration options on the widgets. As you can see, it's very easy and straightforward. There's not a lot of complexity here. And then once I'm done picking my widgets and figuring out what I want to do, I can then add a logo, I can add a title, and when I'm ready, I can preview my apps. And this is where this responsive design concept comes in. I can see for many common device types what this app will look like. So maybe my officers have Surface Pro 3s. That's what my app will look like on a Surface Pro 3. Maybe they have iPhone 10s. That's what the app is going to look like. So you can work with it. You can kind of work through what best combination and placement of widgets makes sense for the way that you expect your users to use the app. And from there, I can just launch my app. And here's my app in desktop form. As I zoom into Tampa, I have a number of different widgets here. One of the widgets that you can see adjusting on the fly as I zoom in and out of the map is the info summary widget that gives me counts of each of the records in each of my layers. As I click on that, I can see the individual records, and I could click on them to zoom into a location if I wanted to. I also have the threat analysis widget that I mentioned earlier. And just to quickly show an example of what that looks like, I'm going to zoom into Tampa a little bit more. I can define an area where I've had a suspicious package. I can select a particular size of a package. So maybe it's a suspicious looking SUV or van. That is generating some mandatory evacuation distance and shelter in place zones. Those are based on the JCAT counterterrorism guide, which is available here as a URL link in the actual widget. And then I can run this tool. And this is what I get back. It automatically generates for me the mandatory evacuation distance based on that threat and a shelter in place area as well. So just a very quick example of a widget that's available for you to use. These outputs are temporary. If you wanted to save them back into your portal so that you could use them in other applications, you just give them a name, press publish, and now they're available for you to use. I've incorporated a number of other widgets we don't really have time to get into. The ERG widget for emergency response guide preparations, a directions widget, a search grid generation widget, a widget that shows how to create projections for crowd size based on a particular geographic area, and then some simple widgets over here like a legend widget or being able to toggle base maps. At the end of this webinar, I'll make the URL to this app available. So if you'd like to play around with some of these widgets, you can play around with this app to your heart's content. So that's a really quick look at some of the capabilities that are available to you through the out-of-the-box functionality that is in Web AppBuilder. Now I'd like to introduce from the Philadelphia Police Department, the director of the Research and Analysis Unit, Kevin Thomas. Kevin is going to start to get into the exciting part of this webinar, which is how Philadelphia PD has taken Web AppBuilder and really leveraged it to build a number of extremely powerful apps to better support the work that their crime and intelligence analysts do. Welcome and thanks for joining us, Kevin.
Oh, thanks for having us. It's great to be on here. So the Research and Analysis Unit is part of the Philadelphia Police Department. We're actually now located down at the Delaware Valley Intelligence Center, the Fusion Center, so we're embedded down here. Within our group, we have not only our GIS section, which helps sort of maintain the system that we built, but we also have quite a few analysts, not only located here at the Fusion Center, Intel, as well as research analysts, as well as the Real-Time Crime Center. But we also have analysts that we've trained that are embedded in every single police district, which serve a key role for one of the reasons why I think we've seen some success, besides the fact that we have a great team. So our mission was to create a single, flexible platform for web-based analysis, situational awareness, information collection that doesn't go into like an RMS traditionally, as well as evidence-based policing efforts. So that's been a journey that that's been going on for quite some time. It started in the late 90s and supporting the Comstock process. And over time, as the technology has evolved, we've evolved with it. And one of the things that we've deployed and is ArcGIS portal, right? Which that gives us the ability to have access to Web AppBuilder as well as all the functionality of AGOL, but on our servers. And we're hosting all that right now in the Azure Government Cloud. So we get all that great stuff, the Web AppBuilder capability, as well as CGIS security compliance as well. And it's all just one integrated system. Our staff augmentation vendor is going to give a little bit of a presentation on that at the end, so you can see a little bit of that technical stuff. But I just wanted to highlight 3 key points that I think were critical in us being able to do what we've done. Number one, like I said before, our development team not only includes our technical people and our staff augmentation, but it also includes all those analysts. Those are our primary users. So they end up serving as testers and also as trainers. So they end up training folks in those districts and showing them the new access to tools. And so they sort of serve multiple purposes. And what we've actually started to see now with Web AppBuilder is those analysts are starting to develop their own applications and then publishing them back for other analysts to use, which is great. So also, Police GIS has become truly the de facto warehouse for PPD. I don't think that was intentional, but it just sort of happened as we began to aggregate more and more data. Access to that data is obviously critical for us being successful. The other piece was that we did require a budget. We needed a budget, a dedicated budget for what we were doing to support, and in that included infrastructure that we needed, like Azure GovCloud, as well as staff augmentation, which is a critical piece for that. So without that dedicated budget, I don't think we would have gotten to where we are today. But I will say that that budget that we operate from, because we're taking advantage of the city's ELA and able to use enterprise license agreement and able to use that platform to our heart's content, it's a much less of an investment than, let's say, going to a third-party sort of siloed system. And those siloed systems more often, they don't give us the kind of flexibility and creativity that this platform does. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to George, and he'll start to demo some of these things that they've done. It's great.
Thank you, Kevin. So as you can see on the map, Philadelphia is broken down into 21 districts or precincts, and each district has at least one sworn officer who is working as a crime analyst. And one of the key responsibilities of our unit is to provide analytical training for them and support their crime analysis functions. We originally were using ArcGIS Desktop as part of the training, but sustaining the skill set of sworn officers became a challenge, especially because talented crime analysts often get promoted quickly. Thus, we naturally became more interested in web-based applications that offer intuitive use. And we already had some department-wide web maps using Flex Viewer, but we needed web-based application that provided some analytical functions. And hence, when Esri Rep mentioned that we can actually build an app in one day, we got super excited, but at the same time, we were kind of skeptical to see whether or not we will actually be able to build an app in such a short period of time. But soon, we found out that he was not lying. And in fact, that quote obviously came from Chris, who was doing the introduction of this webinar. And in the end, we ended up creating so many of these applications, and these are just a subset of applications that we were able to create in a short period of time with little to no coding by using Web AppBuilder. And in fact, some of these applications were created by analysts themselves without scripting or programming background. And as we originally wanted, these apps provided not just visualizations of a crime dots, but analytical functions that support sworn crime analysts. And here's an example, and we can show a couple of examples. Here's an example of part 1 instant search, where instance could be searched not just by date, districts, and the crime type, but also by keywords such as offender description and MOs and so forth. Prior to this, the department was using antiquated Lotus Note to store part 1 instant information, and its function was limited, especially when it comes to search, and certainly it didn't offer visualization. But Web AppBuilder certainly provided a flexible and a quick solution in order for analysts to be able to search a variety of keywords and MOs and the crime patterns and so forth. And also, Web AppBuilder by default provides an ability to export the results in Excel and so forth. We also provided different types of apps. For example, this may be an example of dashboard theme using Web AppBuilder. And you can easily tell that the look or the appearance of the app looks different from what was previously shown. And this time, we were more interested in giving a snapshot of what was happening within the context of overdose for the command staff and other people. And hence, we wanted to provide charts and graphs and so forth in addition to just showing the dots on the map. And Web AppBuilder certainly let us quickly change the app's theme and look again without any coding. So through Web AppBuilder, we were able to provide analytical apps for sworn analysts and command staff. But the ease of creating apps unfortunately created a new problems because we got too excited and we ended up creating too many apps. But again, our solution was actually within Esri's stack of applications. Per Chris's suggestion, we organized our apps using a story map. And as the name implies, the story map is designed to show maps and analysis results along with a story and interpretation. But we just took advantage of tabbed design layout of story maps to put all the apps that we created in a single website. So analysts may start from looking at numbers and stats. And this is our Comstock Sheet, which was not built by using Web AppBuilder, but instead we already had this website or HTML content. But the story map was flexible enough to digest existing online content. And what we did was to just embed a URL. And boom, within 10 seconds, we were able to embed this into a single website again. Then after looking at the numbers, analysts may start examining spatial patterns. And again, this is a web map app, web-based applications that we already had using a Flex Viewer. But again, the story map was flexible enough to digest and accommodate those existing contents. We are in the process of converting this Flex Viewer-based application using Web AppBuilder too, and probably we will be using 1/10 of time that it originally took in order to develop the original application that required JavaScript coding and other things. But again, analysts within the context of this crime analysis scenario, analysts can look at the numbers in the same website and they can move on to spatial analysis, which in turn may identify or may lead to hotspot identification. And after identifying hotspot, analysts can use or examine other patterns by using other tabs. For example, analysts can read through instant narratives using a Part 1 search app and read through the narratives, click a dot, check the pop-ups, which in turn may lead to additional keyword searches on offender description and MOs and so forth. Analysts can also tap into additional data pieces, such as citizen-provided tips. And again, by using Web AppBuilder, we were able to create a similar solution where analysts can search like they do like a Google search. Type in the keywords and type in additional parameters, and you get information back immediately. And the crime analysis, in our view, is not just about the spatial patterns, but again, story maps made it easy to digest other applications that we already had. This is one example, one such example. We are calling this application a link analysis, where an offender's known co-offenders are depicted with blue lines, and anyone with active warrants are shown with red boxes. And unfortunately, we won't be able to do a live demo, but this application is highly interactive, and analysts can click each face or each person or circle to get additional information. Similar to Comstock Sheet and Flex Viewer application, this link analysis app was not built using Web AppBuilder, but instead it was based upon a Python that we already had. But again, StoryMap made it easy to integrate this application as part of the analytical workflow. And in fact, if you look at the top of the screenshot, which may or may not be difficult to see, you can see that it is a single website where multiple applications are designed in this single page. So this analysis app suite, that is how we are calling it, became one-stop shop of conducting analysis. And StoryMap design that we were using was flexible enough to accommodate a variety of contents, such as web-based applications that we already had, and other HTML contents, and SQL Server reporting service reports, and so forth. And what we particularly liked about this design was that analysts were able to go back and forth between tabs while preserving previous analysis results, which facilitated their exploration of crime patterns in so many different ways. What we also liked about Web AppBuilder is that because it was easy to use, analysts themselves became app developers. So some of the applications that we demoed, in fact, were developed by analysts. And this eliminated the need in translating business requirements to IT developers. Analysts knew what they wanted to do, and they could create a prototype, and they could test it, and they could get feedback on their own. But having said that, Web AppBuilder is also flexible to accommodate complex customization through Python and other languages. And I will pass on to our GIS specialist, Lynn, to discuss such customized solution and her application of custom widget to a crime analysis scenario.
Thank you, George. I have two geoprocessing tools that I would like to share with you today. Each was created to allow crime analysts the ability to query several databases from one location. In other words, they would be considered a one-stop shop. Both widgets are simple to use and provide results that could normally take hours to obtain during a normal manual search. I thought the best way to demonstrate them was by using a scenario. A 24th District analyst identified a person of interest in the shooting. Through earlier analysis, she obtained the name and photo identification number of a person of interest. A photo identification number, or PID, is a 6 or 7 digit unique identifier given to every arrested individual. That number never changes and remains with the person, similar to a social security number. The known locations widget is perfect for the next step in her investigation into the shooting, since a photo identification number is all that is required. Once the analyst enters the PID into the known locations tool, 4 databases are queried. These include the defendant database, the incident or crime database, arrest database, and car ped stop table. Besides the PID, the analyst can change the default dates to narrow her query. However, since she is beginning her investigation, she decided to keep the dates from January 2010 to December 2018 in order to gain as much information as possible. As we can see, our analysts obtain arrest and incident locations from that PID. Since the shooting occurred in the 24th District, she zoomed into that area to continue her investigation. Once she zoomed into that area, she clicked the pop-up from the arrest that was very close to the shooting location. She then used the links in the pop-up to learn about the criminal history, prison release information, and incident information regarding the arrest. After she clicked the two links from the pop-up, the prison release information appear. The prison release information and the incident information windows appear. The prison release data provides additional information that could be helpful to the analyst, such as release data from prison and other crimes committed throughout the person's adult lifetime. The incident information window provides specific details on the crime that led to the arrest. This includes the type of crime, location, and police and DA charges. She learned that the person of interest was released from prison for illegal drug possession in 2017. She also learned that the person has a history of selling illegal drugs. Our analyst learned some helpful information that she could use to narrow her next query in the PID by location widget. This widget allows the analyst to create a boundary around the location of her choice, and all PIDs within that area are displayed. The results for this tool include defendant information, arrest information, prison release information, link analysis data, and a summary table with PID frequency information. In this case, the analyst was interested in that particular arrest from 2016 that was very close to the current shooting location. She created her polygon and also changed the dates to include only 2016 to narrow her search. It looks like most databases returned results within the boundary. The tool also provided a link analysis link and summary tool that she could expand. I will explain each of these in more detail. Once the summary table is enlarged, our analyst can identify that the person of interest had an arrest and incident within 2016. The summary table can help to identify those individuals who are familiar to the area by their frequency count. The higher the count, the more likely an individual is familiar with the location. The person of interest in this scenario has a frequency of 2, an arrest and a crime incident. He was moderately familiar with the area in 2016. The analyst may decide to expand her date range to see if the frequency count increases, especially in 2018 when the shooting occurred. As you recall, one result of the PID by location tool was the link analysis URL. Once clicked, all PIDs within the boundary are displayed with connections to other individuals, if they exist. Our analyst noticed a connection between the person of interest and the shooting victim. They were arrested together in 2016. There were also many other offenders that were connected to them as well. In summary, our analyst was able to obtain a significant amount of information in a short period of time due to the ability to query several databases at once. The prison release, incident information, and link analysis links provided even more key data in order to understand the person of interest and their connection to the shooting victim. The analyst was able to quickly answer many questions in her preliminary investigation. Most importantly, she learned that the person of interest has a past illegal drug history and was once arrested with the shooting victim in 2016. The analyst can return to the known locations widget and enter the PID of the shooting victim to get a comprehensive history of his past criminal activities. She may discover another person of interest to the shooting due to the connection she found from the link analysis. She could also use the PID by location widget to create another boundary in the shooting location and expand the dates to include that of the shooting. She could return to the current person of interest and learn of any other connections that could help in identifying the shooter. As you can see, just by using these two widgets, the analyst can continue to investigate, search, query, and gather a great deal of information in a short period of time. This is a snippet of the ArcPy code used to create the known locations widget. Both widgets were created in Python version 2.7. Some of the toolbox tools included are map query tool, select layer by attribute, and copy features. After writing the code, I published the tool in an MXT, added the tool as a widget into Web AppBuilder, added symbology, default time, and used alias names for better clarity. Thank you for allowing me to explain how these two widgets work in Web AppBuilder and implemented by the Philadelphia Police Department. I'll pass it on now to Andrew Smart to talk about our environment.
Thanks, Lynn. Go to the next slide. Yep. All right, so I'm going to briefly talk about the environment that's backing all of this that you've seen today. So this is a full portal implementation, including, of course, portal, server, GeoEvent, utilizing apps such as Insights, Survey 123, and Ops Dashboard. The environment is backed by a massive data warehouse that has been built by aggregating all of the data from 20+ different sources into one common data warehouse that's backed by the enterprise system. This data warehouse is then used for things such as non-Esri applications such as SSRS and or custom applications, but then of course also supports all the services that are used through ArcGIS Server and Portal that are pulled into Web AppBuilder applications and configurations. We're up to about 20+ different systems, but over 100 different data sets. So it's a very large warehouse. GeoEvent is a key component to this. GeoEvent allows us to process real-time data that's being brought in at all times. So CAD information, as CAD events happen, so that some Web AppBuilder applications that are more geared towards real-time information can utilize data as it occurs. On top of that, we are also building a part of the data warehouse also includes log data. So from a CGIS compliance standpoint, being able to log all of the events that happen from a system standpoint, everything that anyone looks at, when they look at it, and what they looked at. And that's supported using services such as Azure Cosmos DB, where we essentially have a limitless amount of log information that can be pumped into the system and then queried and interrogated whenever questions are asked. And on top of that, we're also using Spatial Temporal Big Data Store from a big data perspective to be able to process and analyze hundreds of millions of records in split seconds. All of this, of course, is then deployed on the Azure GovCloud, which is one of the key components to this being successful, is the ability to use Azure GovCloud. So in a case when a server has seen an influx of data being processed, we can scale that server up or scale that server back depending on what's happening at any one time. We can then, of course, utilize any of the services as part of the GovCloud, such as I mentioned, Azure Cosmos DB, application gateways to be able to handle where our traffic is being directed to and when it's being directed, be able to control the health of the system, right from the GS team's ability to do that. So without having to put it in a IT ticket and wait for things to be responded to, the GS team can actually manage their enterprise environment at their fingertips through the Azure console. And that is a key component to being able to make this enterprise system successful. And then of course on top of that, we can integrate with custom APIs that can be all built through the system and utilized in other applications. At the end of the day, these applications are then utilized by everybody within the police department, analysts primarily all day, but then also utilized by field staff that are connected to the network via mobile VPN connections. Everybody is sitting on the city network, and the Azure environment is essentially an extension of the city network and part of the infrastructure. So that any users that's sitting at their desk can access the system. Anybody that's sitting in the field is connected to the network can also access the system. And it looks as if any other server that's running in the enterprise. So it's quite a large system, and it's backing many applications that are being built on this environment. So with that, I will turn it back to Chris to answer any questions.
Great. Thanks a lot, Andrew, and thank you all as well to Kevin and to Lynn and to George. You know what I think what's really interesting about Philadelphia's story is that there's really two stories in one. You heard about not only the the value that Lynn and George are getting in supporting the analytical workflow needs of PPD's analyst staff as well as non-analyst staff using this suite, this app suite that's essentially a story map that contains a whole bunch of different web app builder applications inside of it to make accessing analysis content really simple and easy. But then Andrew's story is really you know, a whole nother story in and of itself, which is exciting, and that is Philly PD really represents the first that I'm aware of fully CGIS compliant public cloud instance of ArcGIS Enterprise. So the infrastructure that Andrew has just described really reflects a modern way of deploying the ArcGIS platform for law enforcement needs that is massively scalable because it lives in Azure Gov. Because it lives in Azure Gov, it's also CGIS compliant, but now Philly does not have the burden of having to maintain that physical infrastructure on premise, and so that absolves them from having to deal with that. So that's a really exciting, really represents two cutting edge stories leading the way with the use of WebGIS in law enforcement. So thank you very much, Kevin, Lynn, George, Andrew. This is really exciting stuff. Now, what you've just seen is kind of some thought leadership with respect to the use of Web AppBuilder and the use of infrastructure to support WebGIS in law enforcement organizations. But you can get started with Web AppBuilder without having to have a CGIS compliant Azure GovCloud instance of ArcGIS Enterprise. You can use Web AppBuilder with ArcGIS Online, or if you have ArcGIS Enterprise already deployed, you can start to take advantage of it now. Some of the introductory help documentation for Web AppBuilder is here at doc.arcgis.com/en/web-appbuilder. That's where you're going to learn about the functionality of all of the different widgets. And the number one recommendation that I usually have for folks who are starting off with Web AppBuilder is you just got to get into that builder and you just got to play with the widgets to understand what they do and how they can be applied to your particular needs and the purpose that you're trying to challenge that you're trying to solve with your app. Next, if you need a little help getting started, we do have a web course from our training catalog at training.esri.com that'll help you get started with building web applications using Web AppBuilder for ArcGIS. And if you'd like to play with the critical infrastructure web app that I showed earlier today, this URL will take you to that. And we'll send out these URLs as a follow-up in an email with the recording of this webinar. While the webinar was occurring, there was all sorts of really good questions. The very first question that I wanted to bring up was from, sorry, I'm looking at my question list right now. The question was, I can't find who asked it. Kevin Morelli asks, under what circumstances would you use the ops dashboard over the Web AppBuilder? Are there differences in responsiveness between the two? That's a really good question, and it's one that often comes up. If you're not familiar, Esri has another web application called Ops Dashboard, and that really represents kind of the intended use case for Ops Dashboard is supporting passive dashboards that are doing things like real-time tracking in an operations center or command post for GPS vehicle tracking or live calls for service data coming in, or is also for interactive purposes. We're exploring things like KPIs. It's meant to be a fully featured functional spatial dashboarding tool. In contrast, Web AppBuilder is not a fully featured spatial dashboarding tool. It's really meant to be a jack of all trades to build all sorts of different kinds of web mapping applications. We do have, as I showed, the one dashboard theme. That's what really usually invites the confusion. The dashboard theme, the easiest way to think about the dashboard theme is that the dashboard theme is the only one of the themes in Web AppBuilder that lets you show 2 widgets at once. All of the other themes only open and show one widget at a time. So if you need to be able to be displaying multiple widgets at once, the dashboard theme is the way to go in Web AppBuilder. But Web AppBuilder is not a dashboarding tool per se in the traditional sense of the use cases that I mentioned before. For Kevin or for the PPD folks, you know, one of the things that came up from multiple people was interest in understanding for the work that you've done, what kinds of budgets are we talking about? What kind of level of effort are we talking about for the work that you guys did, not only to build your custom widgets, but to be able to support the infrastructure that you're working on?
Sure. So in terms of budget, right now our budget for Azure, and again, remember this is a full development, staging, production tiered environment with ETL servers, extract, transform, and load servers to be able to handle the amount of data that's coming in. Right now our budget is around $90,000 per year, possibly going up once we have production up and running to around $120,000 per year. And that's just the full cost of just the Azure servers by themselves. Again, that's scaled for Philadelphia and the Fusion Center. That could be, and the amount of users and traffic that we have, that could go down or up depending on the size of your agency. And that's one of the nice things about it. I will tell a story that real quick that's nice about that is that we recently had a bunch of information that started to stream in that was sort of unexpected. And what we were able to do then is take that ETL server and then up the horsepower almost immediately because it was capping out. If that were on an on-premise environment like we were on previously, that would have been a much more difficult problem to solve. In terms of staff augmentation, we've been, it's adjusted somewhat from anywhere from 100,000 per year to around 250,000 per year. Eventually, once we're fully up and running, that should come down some if we're just talking about maintaining what's going on. And just to give you an idea what our staff includes, internal staff includes, is we have a GIS manager. We have currently 3 GIS specialists, and we have 1 network guy that's basically helps support the Azure piece, and we share some resources with IT in terms of helping with things when there needs to be like a domain change. So we don't have a whole lot of internal support. However, that could be a lot more than a really small agency. So we don't want to give the idea that this is super easy, but at the same time, that kind of investment is far, far less. We've looked at other systems that are multi-million-dollar investments per year that just are not really possible for us. So I hope that answers the question.
That's great. There's another question from William, which was, what has been the overall feedback from officers in Philadelphia regarding the web apps? Is there a consensus that these tools has made their job easier?
I believe so, yes. So I think that the feedback that we get from the police officers and the analysts, we have identified a lot of users that are not analysts that have surprised us when we look back into our logs and stuff. We can easily identify users that are oftentimes lieutenants or sergeants, people that we wouldn't necessarily expect, and then we're able to sort of reach out to them and work with them a bit further. And through their feedback, again, that sort of goes back into the system. In terms of how it's supported, it is a truly integrated part of everything that we do. Even when it's what we project in Comstat is the GIS system, and we map out those layers and follow the cadence of the deputy commissioners and the commissioner. And in addition, even operational planning, it supports operational planning. So if we have a targeted area, that operational plan that the district commander may develop gets actually tied to the pop-up inside the mapping site so that we're able to then, anybody can pull up what the current plan is, and it helps communicate that as well. Eventually, we're looking to even get our analytical products posted on there so that they get spatialized and people are able to pull it up that way.
And specifically for analysis app suite, I don't think we've heard nothing but positive feedback from both police officers and sworn analysts. So definitely kudos to you, Chris, on suggesting a good design.
Aw, thanks, guys. There's a couple of other really good questions. The one that I wanted to talk about next was Ruthie asks, after creating an LE-sensitive web app in Web AppBuilder, how are we to share access out to LE users that do not have ArcGIS Online accounts? Well, there's a couple of important considerations for that, Ruthie. And the first is, does your web app do you intend to have data that has PII or CJI in your web app? If it does, there's important implications for where that data should be hosted. By default, storing PII, which includes CJI, is not part of the terms of service of ArcGIS Online. So ArcGIS Online is not an appropriate place to store that data. You're going to want that data served from a ArcGIS server that's part of your ArcGIS Enterprise deployment, or maybe you don't have ArcGIS Enterprise yet, but you have an older ArcGIS server that's on premise on a server inside of your firewall and your network. That's where you want that data to live. Then when it comes to sharing that data, sharing that web map and app that you've built using that data that's coming from a service that's on your infrastructure to ensure CJIS compliancy. Depending upon what you're using, you've got a couple of options. Preferably, you're using ArcGIS Enterprise that would live either in the Philly example in a public CJIS secure cloud. In their case, they've got their cloud federated to Active Directory, so they're easily able to access it and consume data from there. ArcGIS Enterprise enables you to federate your mapping portal, ArcGIS Enterprise, with your Active Directory accounts. So single sign-on, using their standard network login would give them access. As part of what you get with ArcGIS Enterprise is an unlimited number of kind of read-only users. So you can control security in ArcGIS Enterprise and control who has access to what, and you can make that available to everyone and give everyone read-only use in your organization. If that's not the way that you want to handle it, you also have the ability using ArcGIS Enterprise to share your web apps anonymously inside of your firewall. So that wouldn't require any sign-on. That is an option inside ArcGIS Enterprise. And then that app is accessible to anyone who's on your police network and doesn't require you to access that information. Now, that does have some considerations with respect to logging and access, depending upon the nature of the data and for CJIS compliance purposes. But one of the other patterns that we also see sometimes is people still want to use ArcGIS Online. They can use ArcGIS Online, but they need to store their PII layers on ArcGIS server. They can connect them into ArcGIS Online, and then those layers are only visible inside when you're accessing ArcGIS Online from inside your police network in order to keep that data on premise. In that case, however, you need to have named user accounts for all of that data in order to be able to access ArcGIS Online. So if the use case, kind of as Ruthie is describing, where she wants to be able to share a law enforcement sensitive web app in Web AppBuilder, but we don't want to have to give out ArcGIS accounts, named user accounts to their officers, the way that you would handle that is by building that app in ArcGIS Enterprise and then setting the sharing to everyone in ArcGIS Enterprise, which then basically makes that app accessible anonymously to everyone on your network. Okay, it's 12:59, so we've kind of run out of time for for questions. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating. We had really good questions today. We had really good attendance today on the webinar. And thank you again to Kevin, Lynn, George, and Andrew from Philadelphia Police Department for a really exciting look at some of the great work that they're doing with Web AppBuilder. I did want to mention today's webinar is part of a larger webinar series. We do webinars on a routine basis across not just law enforcement, but also around national security issues, emergency management, fire and emergency services, and emergency call taking and dispatch. These happen every couple of weeks. So the next upcoming webinar is going to be on lessons learned from the campfire response in Northern California. So really exciting stuff. I urge you to kind of keep up on the webinars that are coming out as part of the larger public safety webinar series, because much of the content is extremely relevant for law enforcement, national security work. If you miss any webinar, we record every single webinar. We'll send you an email with that information after this webinar, but you'll find all of those webinars at our webinar page, esri.com/pswebinar, and links to our webinar recordings. All of those are hosted on YouTube, so you can find any historical recording there. If you had further questions, please feel free to contact us. You can reach me, and hey, there's that guy from George's slides. You can reach me at cdelaney@esri.com, or feel free to reach out directly to Kevin, George, Andrew, or Lynn with questions that you have specifically for them. And thanks again, everybody. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.